He got 20 years in prison today. He will serve all but one of those years simultaneously with a 30-year sentence for racketeering and
the ruling here, he was found not guilty of racketeering, not guilty on count 2 and 4, which were the charges, but he was found guilty on counts 3 and 5. Those were the transportation for the purposes of prostitution charges.
This is not me, y'all. I'm fighting for my life. Y'all killing me with this.
2 music moguls, 2 federal cases, but completely different outcomes that expose the ugly truth about celebrity justice in America. Kelly got crushed for racketeering and ST ficking based on psychological control and transportation charges.
A federal appeals court upholds disgraced singer R. Kelly's convictions as well as a 30-year prison term. The Second Circuit Court of Appeals in Manhattan rejected Kelly's several arguments, including that he was falsely charged with racketeering.
Diddy faced the exact same charges, plus brutal physical violence, witness intimidation, and video evidence of beatings, yet somehow beat the most serious counts and walked away with a slap on the wrist.
Sean P. Diddy Combs' mom, Janice, waving to the crowd, his children breaking into smiles as they leave the federal courthouse in downtown Manhattan after the stunning verdict.
The contrast between these cases reveals a justice system where your outcome depends not on what you did, but on how much you can afford to pay for your freedom. So, let's get into how Diddy managed to escape what should have been a life sentence. R. Kelly is currently serving his sentence at Federal Correctional Institution Butner Medium in North Carolina. The man who once commanded sold-out arenas and multi-million-dollar recording contracts now lives in a world of concrete walls, monitored phone calls, and strict daily schedules. His 30-year sentence means he won't be eligible for release until he's in his 80s. Essentially, a life sentence for a man currently in his 50s. The charges that put Kelly away were serious: racketeering conspiracy, and multiple counts of violating the Mann Act by transporting women across state lines for illegal activity. Federal prosecutors painted a picture of Kelly as the head of a criminal enterprise that used his fame and resources to prey on young women and girls.
This is not me, y'all. I'm fighting for my life. Y'all killing me with this.
Kelly's conviction came after decades of rumors and allegations, but the federal case was built on specific incidents and a clear pattern of behavior. The prosecution successfully argued that Kelly and his team operated as a criminal organization, using employees, security, and assistants to facilitate and cover up his alleged crimes. The evidence against Kelly included testimony from multiple victims, financial records showing payments to families and victims, and a clear organizational structure designed to enable his behavior. Most importantly, the government was able to prove their RICO case, that Kelly ran a criminal enterprise through his businesses and team. When Kelly was sentenced in June 2022, the judge showed no mercy. U.S. District Judge Ann Donnelly called Kelly's crimes calculated and methodical, emphasizing the long-term psychological damage to his victims. The 30-year sentence sent a clear message: celebrity status would not protect predators from the full force of federal law. Now contrast Kelly's experience with what we just witnessed in Sean Diddy Combs' federal trial. On paper, the allegations against Diddy appeared even more serious than those that sent Kelly away for life. Federal prosecutors accused Diddy of running a criminal enterprise involving violence, drug distribution, ficking, and witness intimidation. The evidence seemed overwhelming. Prosecutors had surveillance video of Diddy physically assaulting his ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, in a hotel hallway. They had text messages where Cassie described having scars all over and lumps in my face from getting hit, with Diddy allegedly responding by telling her to run to a plastic surgeon now. They had testimony from multiple witnesses describing a pattern of violence, coercion, and criminal activity spanning decades. They had evidence of what prosecutors called freak-offs, drug-fueled counters that witnesses described as coercive and traumatic. They had financial records, employee testimony, and what appeared to be a clear criminal enterprise. But unlike Kelly's case, where the charges stuck and the sentence was harsh, Diddy's legal team managed to systematically dismantle the prosecution's case. Just days before closing arguments, federal prosecutors quietly dropped some of their most serious charges: attempted kidnapping, arson allegations tied to Kid Cudi's car being firebombed, and aiding and abetting ficking. The jury ultimately convicted Diddy on only 2 transportation charges, rejecting the racketeering conspiracy that was the heart of the government's case. The maximum sentence Diddy now faces is about 20 years, but legal experts predict he'll serve far less, possibly as little as 5 to 7 years. When the verdict was read, Diddy's courtroom erupted in celebration. His family applauded, his lawyers hugged, and Diddy himself bowed his head in prayer before standing up and clapping. The scene looked more like a victory party than a federal conviction. How the prosecution lost what seemed like a sure thing. What made this verdict even more shocking was how confident prosecutors seemed going into the trial. The charges against Diddy were steep. The jury, made up of 8 men and 4 women, was tasked with deciding on 5 criminal counts. These included racketeering conspiracy, 2 counts of ficking, and 2 counts of transportation for the purpose of peacestitution. But here's where the courtroom chess game got interesting. Just days before closing arguments, prosecutors dropped some of the most explosive charges. Attempted kidnapping? Gone. Arson allegations tied to Kid Cudi's torched car? Dropped. Aiding and abetting ficking? Removed. The courtroom heard none of it in the final jury instructions. That sudden shift didn't go unnoticed. According to legal documents, the government respectfully withdrew those predicate acts, stating they would no longer proceed on those theories. That decision dramatically narrowed the battlefield and reduced Diddy's potential sentence. What was once a possible 25 to life sentence now faced estimates of 7 years or less, assuming conviction on what was left. For some, that was seen as a strategic retreat. For others, it was a warning sign.
He will be convicted of prostitution. There's plenty of evidence for that. Now, that by itself would be a loss for the government. This would be the most expensive prostitution trial in American history. I think on the government has some holes in their case. Some of that testimony from the witnesses is damaging.
By the time the jury sat down with Judge Arun Subramanian's 61 pages of instructions, they weren't just deliberating facts. They were deliberating a narrative. Diddy's defense attorney, Mark Agnifilo, mocked the government's case, calling it overreach. They've charged personal use drugs and threesomes as racketeering, he told the jury, arguing the prosecution was twisting consensual behavior into a criminal conspiracy. But the prosecution painted a different picture, a calculated system of abuse that relied on loyalty, fear, and silence. Assistant U.S. Attorney Christy Slavic told the jury that Diddy used his power to enforce compliance through intimidation, not just with his ex-girlfriends, but with the people who helped arrange, film, and clean up his freak-offs. The defendant used power, violence, and fear to get what he wanted. He thought his wealth and fame put him above the law, the attorney said. Meanwhile, Diddy himself sat in the courtroom, dressed in khakis and a light sweater, clutching 2 books, The Power of Positive Thinking and The Happiness Advantage. His children, mother, and half-sister sat behind him. When the jury left the room, his family bowed their heads. They prayed, and they applauded. That moment, captured in courtroom sketches and social commentary, became a flashpoint online. To some, it looked like defiance. To others, desperation. The jury had access to a laptop loaded with text messages, videos, surveillance footage, including the infamous 2016 hotel beating of Cassie Ventura, Diddy's former girlfriend. They had a verdict sheet, a list of exhibits, and over 6 weeks of testimony echoing in their heads. And yet, Just an hour into deliberations, the jury hit a wall. It didn't take long for things to fall apart. Just over an hour after the jury began deliberating in Sean Diddy Combs' federal trial, Judge Aaron Subramanian received a note that shifted the mood in the entire courthouse. "We are concerned Juror 25 cannot follow your Honor's instructions." The courtroom went still. Juror 25, a molecular biologist, a veterinarian, and by all accounts, one of the most educated people on the panel, was struggling to interpret the law. That meant one thing: the integrity of the entire verdict was now in question. Judge Subramanian had just finished walking the jury through all 5 counts Diddy was facing. He reminded them that the burden of proof rested entirely on the prosecution, that they had to decide not just who was believable, but what story was truthful. And, he emphasized, if they believed even one witness lied on purpose, they had the right to disregard that person's entire testimony. But the instructions, 61 pages thick and dense with legal jargon, seemed to rattle at least one member of the jury, a development the defense quickly jumped on. Attorney Mark Agnifilo urged the court to proceed with caution. In the meantime, Judge Subramanian held steady. He told jurors to take their time, eat, rest, resume fresh in the morning. But behind the scenes, both sides knew what was at stake. All it took was one confused juror to cause a mistrial. It didn't end there. Just hours later, a second note came from the jury. This time, they weren't asking about verdict sheets or timelines. They were stuck on the drug distribution charge. Specifically, whether the person receiving drugs had to ask for them in advance, and if that request altered the definition of distribution. The prosecution's answer? A firm number. The defense, once again, asked for more time. Diddy's legal team needed breathing room, not just for legal strategy, but because the jury's question suggested they were seriously considering the narcotics distribution allegation as one of the 2 required predicate acts for a racketeering conviction. In fact, Prosecutor Comey said, "There is clearly some misunderstanding, but that doesn't change the fact that distribution occurred." At 5 p.m., the jury called it a day. Judge Subramanian thanked them for their time, told them to avoid media coverage, and reminded them to keep an open mind. Behind him, Diddy, still ramrod straight in his chair, turned to his family. They bowed their heads again. Outside the courtroom, the press circled. Twitter lit up, and fans, divided between number Free Diddy and number Survivors Deserve Justice, flooded timelines with theories. Meanwhile, Diddy's circle remained calm. Reports began to surface that his family was already planning a July 4th celebration in Miami, complete with fireworks, VIP guests, and a possible red carpet. One source told Media Takeout, "I can't say for certain that Diddy's getting acquitted, but everyone's acting like he'll definitely be at the party." That confidence only added to the tension. Was it arrogance, or did they know something the public didn't? Over 6 weeks, federal prosecutors presented testimony from 34 witnesses, each tasked with building a case that Sean Diddy Combs operated a criminal organization fueled by power, money, and violence. The testimonies painted a disturbing picture of alleged abuse, coercion, and systematic intimidation. The most powerful and emotionally devastating testimony came from 3 women. 2 whose identities were well known to the public, and 1 whose name would never be revealed. Cassie Ventura, the R&B artist who maintained a relationship with Diddy for more than a decade, spent 4 days on the witness stand. Her testimony described what prosecutors characterized as a life of luxury that masked a reality of control and abuse. She detailed being coerced into explicit encounters with male prostitutes, while Diddy allegedly observed, recorded, or orchestrated the activities. Prosecutors referred to these incidents as freak-offs or hotel nights, allegedly drug-fueled gatherings involving hired male companions and complex power dynamics. Cassie's testimony portrayed these not as willing participation, but as forced compliance with demands from someone who allegedly controlled every aspect of her life, from her finances to her career opportunities. Among the most shocking evidence presented were text message exchanges between Cassie and Diddy from March 2016. In one message, Cassie wrote about having scars all over and lumps in my face from getting hit, and needing more than a surgeon. Diddy's alleged response was chilling, and you need to run to a plastic surgeon now. The courtroom reaction was audible when these messages appeared on screens. But the prosecution didn't rely solely on text evidence. Jurors also viewed hotel surveillance footage showing Diddy allegedly kicking, dragging, and assaulting Cassie in a Los Angeles hotel corridor, video that had been leaked to media outlets months before the trial, lending credibility to her abuse allegations. However, the defense team came prepared with their own explosive evidence. They presented an audio recording featuring not Diddy, but Cassie herself, making threatening statements towards someone who claimed to have compromising footage from one of the alleged freak-off sessions. In the recording, Cassie can be heard saying, "I will cut you up and put you in the dirt."
Yeah, you don't have to see it, but it's my life and I'll kill you. Yeah, but no, I will kill you if you don't show me right now. I will kill you and I will hide you and I will cut you up and put you in the dirt right now.
The defense argued that this wasn't just an outburst. It was evidence that Cassie was not always the powerless victim the prosecution had portrayed. The jury was left to decide whether that moment revealed a pattern of fear and trauma, or something more complicated. And then came Jane. She testified anonymously under a pseudonym. Her voice trembling, she detailed a 3-year relationship with Combs that followed a near-identical pattern: drugs, violence, S-parties. Jane claimed that Combs gave her ecstasy, Xanax, and alcohol before coercing her into Group S scenarios, often against her will. Prosecutors didn't stop with just Cassie and Jane's testimonies. They reinforced their narratives with a lineup of corroborating witnesses whose accounts helped paint a fuller, more chilling picture. Makeup artists and former employees testified to seeing bruises on Cassie, confirming physical abuse that aligned with her story. A male escort told the court he had been hired to participate in the infamous hotel parties, events Cassie and Jane had both described in detail. Diddy's former assistant, Capricorn Clark, recalled being taken to an abandoned building by one of Combs' security guards and forced to undergo a lie detector test after being accused of stealing jewelry, a tactic the prosecution argued demonstrated Diddy's obsession with control and humiliation. Cassie's own mother took the stand and explained how she was forced to take out a home equity loan after Diddy allegedly blackmailed her daughter, a debt Diddy eventually paid off. And then there was rapper Kid Cudi, who told jurors that his car was firebombed shortly after he began seeing Cassie. While he stopped short of direct accusation, he made it clear he believed Diddy was behind the act of arson, a belief that supported the prosecution's theory of retaliation. The prosecution argued that this wasn't random chaos, it was a pattern. Each incident reinforced the next. Each witness didn't just reveal what happened, they revealed a culture around Diddy that made these things possible. Defense lawyers did their best to poke holes in the story. They argued that Cassie and Jane had consented to the encounters, that they were motivated by money, and that bad relationships don't equal crimes. Their closing arguments described Diddy as flawed, perhaps even violent, but not a racketeer, not a tea-ficker. But the prosecution pushed back, saying he thought his fame, wealth, and power put him above the law. That stops now. The defense didn't call a single witness, not even Diddy. Instead, they let the testimony sit. Their strategy was simple: create doubt. Let the jury wonder if these women, many of whom still accepted gifts or money from Diddy, were telling the full truth. Let the silence do the talking. But for the jurors, the silence may have spoken too loud. In any case, what makes Diddy's legal victory even more suspicious isn't just what happened in the courtroom. It's the network of connections and influence that protected him long before the trial began. Unlike R. Kelly, who faced his charges essentially alone, Diddy had apparently anticipated potential legal troubles and built a sophisticated support system that extends far beyond expensive lawyers. The streets were talking even before the verdict came down. Twitter was in flames, and if you were paying attention, the real question wasn't just, will Diddy go to jail? It was, how did he manage to stay out when the evidence seemed so overwhelming? The speculation wasn't coming from fringe bloggers or conspiracy theorists alone. It came from the likes of Suge Knight, who phoned into a podcast from behind bars and laid it out bluntly about Diddy's connections and influence.
Diddy is an FBI informant. He's been one a long time. So I don't believe that he's going to go to prison. And if he do, it'll be for something very, very small. It wouldn't be nothing what the people think.
Unlike Kelly's prosecution, which proceeded without any political interference, rumors swirled about Diddy's political connections potentially providing a safety net. The speculation about a possible Trump pardon wasn't as far-fetched as it seemed. Diddy had been photographed with Trump and Melania at multiple high-profile events over the years, and Trump had already established a pattern of pardoning celebrities and hip-hop figures like Lil Wayne, Kodak Black, and Joe Exotic. But the political connections allegedly run deeper than just photo opportunities. Industry sources suggest that Diddy has cultivated relationships with prosecutors, judges, and federal officials through years of strategic networking, charitable donations, and political contributions. When you're facing federal charges, having people in the system who view you as more than just another defendant can make all the difference between Kelly's harsh 30-year sentence and Diddy's courtroom celebration. Another telling difference between Kelly's and Diddy's cases was how witnesses behaved. While Kelly's prosecution had multiple victims willing to testify in detail about their experiences, Diddy's case was plagued by witnesses who suddenly became unavailable or changed their stories. According to reports, several people who had originally agreed to testify against Diddy quietly withdrew from the case as the trial date approached. Some cited fear for their safety, but others may have been influenced by Diddy's network reaching out with either threats or incentives to stay silent. This kind of systematic witness management requires resources and connections that go far beyond what most defendants can access. It suggests a level of influence that extends into communities, families, and social networks in ways that can make potential witnesses think twice about cooperating with federal prosecutors. Then came Suge Knight's explosive allegations about Corey, the mysterious figure he claims helped start Bad Boy Records with drug money. According to Suge, Corey had done federal time, received a presidential pardon, and was still operating in Los Angeles with connections to major criminal figures.
Corey is the guy that started Bad Boy with Puffy, with drug money. Corey go to prison. I think he got life for the drugs. Puffy got Corey pardoned.
Suge alleged that Corey was giving money to Keffe D's son, the same Keffe D tied to the Tupac murder investigation.
You don't have no money. You got the money that Puffy gives you. So why would Puffy need to give Keffe D's son money to help his father? That's the question right there.
That story, tangled as it is, only added another layer to the already dense fog of this case. Whether or not the feds were building a larger RICO web, the psychological impact was real. Witnesses in this case were already showing signs of fear. According to reports, several people who had originally agreed to testify recanted or pulled out quietly as the trial date approached. Some believed that even if Diddy was convicted, his reach would still stretch beyond prison bars. That fear was so widespread, a number of public advocacy accounts began openly tracking witness safety post-trial. And still, As the jury continued deliberating, rumors swirled about a July 4th celebration being quietly planned by Diddy's family in Miami. Some tabloids reported that everyone's acting like he'll be there, even with the trial hanging over his head. According to online speculations, there were 3 possible scenarios: full acquittal, guilty with bail pending, or the most bizarre, a potential pardon by Donald Trump. The Trump theory wasn't as far-fetched as it seemed. Diddy, Melania, and Trump had all been photographed together at events years ago, and Trump had famously pardoned Lil Wayne, Kodak Black, and Joe Exotic. In a different kind of trial, these theories might be dismissed. But this wasn't just any trial. This was the trial of a man who, for 3 decades, had been a central figure in music, fashion, media, and cultural influence. His downfall, or survival, wasn't just about guilt. It was about what kind of accountability someone like Diddy could actually face in a system built by and for people like him. To convict Sean Diddy Combs under RICO, federal prosecutors had what should have been an easy path to victory. They didn't need to prove every single allegation, just a pattern of criminal enterprise involving at least 2 predicate crimes. The RICO statute was practically designed for cases like this: a powerful figure allegedly running a criminal organization through a legitimate business front. But what happened next exposed just how badly the prosecution fumbled what many legal experts called a slam dunk case. By the trial's end, that seemingly bulletproof pattern had crumbled. Prosecutors quietly dropped charges of attempted kidnapping, aiding serious federal crimes, and arson, the very charges that would have painted the clearest picture of a criminal enterprise. What remained were the weaker charges of transportation violations, substance distribution, and witness tampering. The law required only one coerced act to meet the RICO standard. Federal prosecutors had decades of alleged behavior, hundreds of witnesses, financial records, and surveillance footage. They had every tool in the federal arsenal at their disposal, and yet they couldn't convince a jury that Diddy was running a criminal organization. In any case, as federal prosecutors regroup and consider their next moves, as Diddy's team prepares for sentencing, and as the entertainment industry tries to process what this verdict means, 50 Cent continues to position himself as the unofficial prosecutor in a court that never closes. And based on his recent activity, he's just getting started writing the next chapter. Anyway, that's it for this video, folks. Bye.